How important do you think it is for herbalists to know botany, or if at all?
So first we have to use the different terms. So
Sure.
botany is the study of plants. And so I actually just know a very small segment of botany. Like if I was a real like I don't understand plant physiology that well, or I don't understand plant diseases that well, or how plants grow in specific ways, or so botany is an extremely large. So anybody who's a botanist will have specialty in botany.
Gotcha.
My specialty would be taxonomy, which is the naming of plants. So I know plants because I can identify them because I know their taxonomy and botanical characteristics.
Good differentiation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do say I'm a botanist because that's a shorthand for lots of different kinds of botany. So me and Howie Bronstein are the two herbalists that force our students to learn how to identify plants in a technical manner. And almost all the students dislike it. It's a lot of work. It's vigorous. It's very deductive. Yeah, certain kinds of brains work for it better. I have a deductive brain, so it works good for me. Like if it's this or this and it's not this. If it's this and this and it's this. But most of the students, like Greg, who is here, actually took botany in my school and then went with it. Yeah. But I would say most of them just resell their Gleason and Cronquist, which is the technical book we use. But is it important? I would say if you're gathering plants and you're naming them. So if you have like a cultural milieu, if you've been grown up in a tradition, if you live in an area, so you grew up around Portland, Oregon, and then somebody who knows the plants well taught you all those plants and you stay there, you don't really need to know. Like you have learned the plants from an expert, whether they're science trained or traditional trained. Yeah. But if then you travel, let's say you go to Wisconsin and then you start picking plants, then it's important to know the differences from them. And one thing I think that gets overlooked is that there are rare plants. Like here there will not be. This is a very used thing. There's a lot of non-natives, and even the native plants are the common native plants. But in many areas, and herbalists often wildcraft in places that have been less disturbed, there are just rare plants that look like not rare plants. So the differentiation is going to be technical. And so like it might have to do with how the bract is based on it. So I would say if you're going wildcrafting outside of your scope of knowledge, then actually knowing how to identify plants is important for the plant's sake. And then, of course, if you're putting it in people's bodies, which is kind of what herbalists do, then that's also important.
I can see that.
Yeah, there's a lot of safe plants. But, you're talking to somebody who spent this. So, like, my nemesis is the Botany app. Right, because that's going to displace me eventually. Like right now, they're not great, so I have a few more years before those botany apps where you take a picture and it shows that they're going to get really excellent because they're AI, right? So, yes.
I have to ask to follow up. I mean, I know we're kind of kidding about the AI stuff, but maybe not as well. Are you actually worried, like, say, an herbalist career path might be in danger because of AI and everything? Or
I think we're so low on the hierarchical pay scale of anybody that nobody's going to AI us anytime soon because it's not worth it. Like it's just cheaper to pay herbalists to do their job. So I think that AI is not going to do it. But actually, probably not for a long time for the same reason. So it'd actually probably be easier for a medical person to have an AI diagnosis because they tend to ask standardized questions. Right. Herbalists don't tend to ask standardized questions. But in the future, some of it will be taken over. I mean, it only makes sense that, you put in information over the course of years, it's going to just improve. Yeah. And so, but it will not be my generation.
Yeah. Well, you were bringing up Portland to Wisconsin, and
should have said Eugene.
Well, no, you're absolutely right, though. So I moved from Eugene, Oregon, to Wisconsin, and I had the fortune of taking the Columbine School of Botanical Studies, where I did want to say, at first, learning the botany it didn't come natural to me.
Right.
I will say I'm super grateful that I did it because eventually I did kind of pick it up, and now you see the wall of green, and now I can actually differentiate between plants, see the botanical characteristics, and now that I live in Wisconsin, although I don't know a lot of the plants, I do see certain characteristics, and I'm like, at least I could say it's in that plant family. So I'm super grateful to Howie and Steven and the Columbine School for that.
It's amazing. I travel fairly frequently. And if you stay actually in the northern hemisphere of the world,
Yeah.
the families are pretty consistent. And if the plant's in flower, you're like, oh, that's a Rosaceae, that's a Berberidaceae. And so it really allows identification. So that means if I go to a new place, I need a flora. A flora is a book that has all the plants of an area. But I don't have to start from the beginning, because often I look at a flower, I'm like, oh, that's going to be, actually the Phrymaceaes are very difficult to tell. There's a Phryma over here.